Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation. We're going to explore the fascinating world of diseases of the nervous system, specifically those classified under G00 to G99. In this session, we'll cover the main types of nervous system disorders, their characteristics, and some key insights. I'm excited to have you all here, so let's get started. Let's take a closer look at the anatomy of the nervous system. The nervous system can be broadly classified into two main parts: the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system, or CNS, includes the brain and the spinal cord. These are like the command center and relay station for all the information in your body. On the other hand, the peripheral nervous system consists of the nerves that radiate out from the brain and spinal cord, which we call cranial and spinal nerves. These nerves act like messengers, carrying signals between your brain and the rest of your body. The nervous system essentially works by sending electrical messages, or signals, back and forth, allowing your brain to communicate with every part of your body. Understanding this basic structure helps us see how interconnected and efficient our nervous system really is. The central nervous system is truly the control center of our body. When we talk about the brain, we're referring to a highly complex organ that manages so many vital functions. It's responsible for our thoughts, memories, emotions, and even sensory experiences like touch. But it doesn't stop there. It also controls motor skills, which help us move, our vision, and even fundamental processes like breathing and regulating body temperature. Hunger and many other automatic processes that keep us alive are also governed by the brain. Now, within the brain itself, there are key parts that each have their specific roles. The cerebrum, for example, is the largest part and is crucial for thinking, reasoning, and voluntary movements. The cerebellum, located at the back of the brain, helps coordinate our balance and fine motor skills. And then there's the brain stem, which acts as a vital connection between the brain and the spinal cord, managing basic life functions like breathing, heartbeat, and alertness. Understanding these different parts and their functions is fundamental because they work together seamlessly to keep us functioning. This interconnectedness highlights just how intricate and vital our central nervous system truly is in maintaining overall health and performance. The cerebrum is actually the largest part of your brain, and it's really the center of your conscious thoughts and actions. When we talk about the outer surface of the cerebrum, that called the cerebral cortex, and it's where many of our higher brain functions happen. The cerebrum is divided lengthwise into two halves, what we call the left and right hemispheres. This division is marked by a deep groove running down the middle. These two hemispheres aren't just mirror images. They have specialized functions and communicate with each other through a bundle of nerve fibers. Each hemisphere is further divided into 5 lobes: the frontal, parietal, temporal, insular, and occipital lobes. These lobes are responsible for different functions, like movement, sensation, hearing, vision, and even some aspects of emotions and decision-making. Understanding the structure of the cerebrum helps us see how complex and organized our brain really is, each part working together to enable us to think, feel, and act. This structural setup is fundamental to how our brain supports our everyday lives and behaviors. Let's take a closer look at the cerebellum. It's located at the very back of the brain, just beneath the cerebrum, sitting underneath the larger upper part. This position is key because the cerebellum plays a crucial role in helping us maintain balance, coordinate our movements, and ensure smooth, precise motion. The cerebellum isn't just a simple structure. It has 2 hemispheres. Think of them as the left and right halves, and 3 main lobes. These lobes are called the anterior, posterior, and flocculonodular lobes, each contributing to different aspects of motor control and balance. An important feature of the cerebellum is its deep cerebellar nuclei. These are like relay stations that send processed information to other parts of the brain, helping us adjust our movements and maintain coordination seamlessly. Understanding the cerebellum's structure and function really ties into our broader discussion of how the brain manages complex motor tasks and keeps us steady and coordinated in everyday life. The brainstem is a vital part of our nervous system that connects the cerebrum, which is the main part of the brain, to the spinal cord. It includes several important structures: the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. These areas work together to control some of the most fundamental functions our body needs to survive. For example, the brainstem manages things like breathing, maintaining our heart rate, and regulating blood pressure. Now, within the brainstem, the pons plays a particularly crucial role. Think of it as a kind of bridge, literally, connecting the cerebellum, which is involved in coordination and balance, to the rest of the brain. It's situated above the medulla oblongata and below the midbrain, making it a key relay station. Understanding how the brainstem functions helps us see how our body keeps these essential processes running smoothly without us even thinking about them. It's a perfect example of how interconnected and efficient our nervous system really is, supporting the overall theme of how different brain parts coordinate to keep us alive and well. The spinal cord is a long, cylindrical structure made up of nervous tissue that runs within the vertebral column. Its main role is to transmit both sensory and motor signals throughout the body. Think of it as a communication highway, carrying messages from the brain to tell your body how to move, and vice versa, bringing sensory information back up to the brain for processing. This dual function is crucial because it connects the brain with the rest of the body, ensuring smooth and coordinated actions. Understanding the spinal cord helps us appreciate how our nervous system maintains control and communication, which is at the core of the overall function of our nervous system. Let's take a closer look at the cranial nerves, which are a vital part of our nervous system. There are 12 pairs of these nerves, and they originate directly from the brain. Their main role is to transmit information between the brain and various parts of the head, neck, and even the torso. Starting with the olfactory nerve, also known as cranial nerve eye, this one is responsible for our sense of smell. Without it, we wouldn't be able to detect odors around us. Next is the optic nerve, cranial nerve eye, which is essential for vision, allowing us to see the world clearly. Moving on, the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve eye, controls eye movements, pupil constriction, and the shape of the lens, which is crucial for focusing. The trochlear nerve, cranial nerve IV, manages the downward and inward rotation of the eye, helping us look in different directions. The trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve V, is quite important because it handles facial sensation and is responsible for chewing. Then we have the abducens nerve, cranial nerve VI, which controls lateral eye movement, allowing us to look side to side. Next up is the facial nerve, cranial nerve VII, which influences facial expressions, taste sensations, and salivation. The vestibulocochlear nerve, cranial nerve VII, is responsible for hearing and maintaining our balance, both vital for our interaction with the environment. The glossopharyngeal nerve, cranial nerve IX, plays a role in swallowing, taste, and saliva production. Then there's the vagus nerve, cranial nerve X, a particularly long and complex nerve that controls many functions, including heart rate, digestion, and breathing, highlighting its importance in autonomic regulation. Moving to the accessory nerve, cranial nerve XI, which controls the muscles in our neck and shoulders, helping us move and stabilize those areas. Finally, the hypoglossal nerve, cranial nerve XII, governs tongue movement, which is essential for speech and swallowing. Understanding these nerves helps us see how intricately connected the brain is to almost every function we perform. They form a foundational part of the nervous system's communication network, enabling us to sense, move, and adapt to our environment seamlessly. Let's talk about spinal nerves. There are 31 pairs of these nerves, and they serve as the vital links between the spinal cord and the rest of the body. Think of them as communication highways, relaying important information in both directions. They transmit sensory signals, which tell us about what we're feeling, like touch or temperature. They also carry motor signals that enable muscle movements. Additionally, they handle autonomic signals that control involuntary functions, such as heart rate and digestion. It's important to remember that spinal nerves are part of the peripheral nervous system, meaning they extend beyond the central nervous system to reach muscles, skin, and organs. This connection highlights how our nervous system is organized to coordinate everything from voluntary movements to automatic bodily functions. Understanding these nerves helps us see how complex and integrated our nervous system truly is, and how it supports all aspects of our health and activity. Let's take a closer look at the neuron, which is the fundamental building block of the nervous system. Think of it as the nerve cell that carries out the essential functions of communication within our body. Now, based on what they do, neurons can be grouped into three main types. First, we have sensory neurons. These are responsible for gathering information from inside and outside the body, like detecting temperature, light, or touch, and bringing that data into the central nervous system for processing. Next, there are motor neurons. These take the commands from the brain or spinal cord and send signals to muscles, organs, and glands, telling them how to respond. And finally, we have interneurons, which are only found within the central nervous system. Their role is to connect one neuron to another, facilitating complex reflexes and thought processes. Understanding these different neuron types helps us see how the nervous system manages to coordinate and control everything from simple reflexes to complex thoughts. This interconnected network is truly remarkable and central to how we function every day. Let's take a closer look at the neuron. Neurons are the fundamental building blocks of the nervous system. They are specialized cells designed to transmit information throughout the body. The key points to remember are that neurons communicate through electrical and chemical signals, enabling us to think, feel, move, and respond to our environment. A typical neuron has several important parts. The cell body, which contains the nucleus and controls the cell's activities. Dendrites, which are like branches that receive signals from other neurons. And the axon, a long fiber that transmits signals away from the cell body to other neurons or muscles. Understanding how neurons work helps us grasp the bigger picture of how our nervous system functions as a whole. They are the core units that allow complex processes, like learning and memory, to take place. So, in essence, without neurons, our ability to process information and interact with the world around us would not be possible. Let's take a closer look at what a synapse actually is. A synapse is essentially the junction between two nerve cells, or neurons. It's a tiny gap, so small that it might be hard to imagine, that allows signals to pass from one neuron to another. Now, because this gap is so narrow, the way signals cross it isn't by direct contact, but rather through a process called diffusion. This is where neurotransmitters come into play. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that carry signals across this gap. They're crucial for communication not just between neurons, but also between neurons and other cells like muscles and glands. Some of the key neurotransmitters you might have heard of include glutamate, GABA, acetylcholine, dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Each of these plays a vital role in different functions, from mood regulation to muscle activation. Understanding how these chemical messengers work helps us see the bigger picture of how our nervous system operates seamlessly. It's a fundamental part of how signals are transmitted rapidly and precisely throughout our body, which is central to the overall theme of neural communication. All right, let's talk about pain, which is a common experience but can vary quite a bit. When we classify pain, one of the main factors we look at is how long it lasts. So, pain can generally be divided into two main types based on its duration. First, we have acute pain. This type of pain comes on suddenly, often in response to an injury or illness. It's usually short-lived, meaning it doesn't stick around for long. The good news is it typically resolves once the underlying cause is treated or heals. Then there's chronic pain. This kind persists for longer than 3 months, and sometimes even after the initial injury or illness has healed. Chronic pain can really affect daily life, making routine activities more difficult and impacting overall well-being. Understanding these distinctions helps us better manage and treat pain, especially when considering the overall theme of health and recovery. Recognizing whether pain is acute or chronic is key to providing appropriate care and support. Let's talk about the different types of pain based on their underlying causes. First, we have nociceptive pain, which is caused by actual tissue damage or inflammation. This type of pain can be broken down further into somatic and visceral pain. Somatic pain originates from muscles, skin, or joints, so think of it as the pain you feel from a cut, a bruise, or a muscle strain. It's usually localized and easier to pinpoint. On the other hand, visceral pain comes from internal organs, like the stomach or intestines. This pain is often described as deep, squeezing, or aching, and can sometimes be harder to identify precisely. Now, moving on to neuropathic pain. This type is quite different because it results from nerve damage itself. Conditions like diabetes, shingles, or sciatica can cause this type of pain. It's often described as burning, stabbing, or tingling, and can be quite persistent and challenging to treat. Understanding these distinctions is crucial because they help us determine the most effective approaches for managing pain. Recognizing whether pain is nociceptive or neuropathic guides us toward targeted treatments, which is a key part of comprehensive pain management. All right, let's take a closer look at the pain pathway. The pain pathway is actually a pretty complex system that plays a crucial role in how we experience pain. It starts with the signals that originate from different parts of our body when there's an injury or potential harm. These signals are then transmitted through specialized nerves, which act like messengers, carrying the pain information towards the brain. Once these signals reach the brain, they are processed and interpreted, allowing us to perceive pain and respond accordingly. Understanding this pathway is key because it helps us see how pain isn't just a simple sensation. It's a sophisticated communication system that involves multiple steps. Throughout this presentation, we've been exploring how pain impacts us physically and emotionally, and the pain pathway is central to that understanding. Recognizing how these signals travel and are processed helps us appreciate the complexity behind pain management and treatment strategies. Let's talk about plegia or paralysis. The term plegia is a combining form that we often see in medical terminology. When added to a word, it indicates paralysis or a stroke. Essentially, it describes a complete loss of muscle function in a specific part of the body. Now, there are different types of plegia, each affecting different areas. For example, monoplegia refers to paralysis of just a single limb, like an arm or a leg. Hemiplegia involves paralysis on one side of the body, which is common after strokes. Paraplegia affects the lower half of the body, including both legs, often due to spinal injuries. And then we have quadriplegia, which is paralysis of all four limbs, both arms and legs, typically resulting from more extensive spinal cord damage. Understanding these types helps us grasp the severity and the specific areas impacted by paralysis. Recognizing these distinctions is crucial in diagnosis and treatment planning, especially as we aim to improve patient outcomes and tailor rehabilitation strategies. So let's talk about plegia or paralysis. It occurs when there's damage to the nerves that control muscle movement. These nerves can be affected in different parts of the nervous system, such as the brain, spinal cord, or peripheral nerves. Understanding the location of the damage helps us classify the type of plegia. When the damage happens in the brain or spinal cord, we call it central plegia. On the other hand, if the damage is to the nerves outside of the brain and spinal cord, we refer to that as peripheral plegia. This distinction is important because it influences how the paralysis presents and how we approach treatment. Recognizing whether the damage is central or peripheral helps us better understand the underlying cause and plan appropriate interventions. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how nerve damage impacts muscle function, and plegia is a clear example of that. It's crucial to identify where the damage is because it directly guides our clinical decisions and management strategies. Today, I want to walk you through some guidelines for coding plegia, which is a term used for paralysis. The main ICD-10-CM category we focus on is G82, which covers paraplegia and quadriplegia. When we see G80-220, that indicates paraplegia, but without specifying whether it's complete or incomplete. It's basically used when the documentation mentions paraplegia but doesn't clarify the severity. Then, if the report states that the paraplegia is complete, we use G8221. And for cases where the paraplegia is incomplete, G8222 is the appropriate code. Moving on, G8223 is used when the paralysis affects all 4 limbs. That's quadriplegia. We also need to be aware of G81, which refers to hemiplegia, paralysis on one side of the body. This code is applied when the hemiplegia is mentioned without further detail, or if it's an old or long-standing condition, regardless of the cause. Understanding these distinctions helps ensure accurate coding and better communication within patient records. It ties into the overall theme of precise documentation and coding, which is crucial for effective patient management and data analysis. Let's go over the guidelines of PLEGIA. First, it's important to understand that for a right-handed person, the right side of the body is typically dominant, meaning that side tends to be stronger and more coordinated. Conversely, the left side in that case would be non-dominant. Now, for a left-handed person, it's the opposite. The left side is usually dominant, and the right side is non-dominant. An important point to remember is that if the person's handedness isn't specified, we generally assume the right side to be dominant by default. This assumption helps us have a standard reference point when assessing or planning treatment. These guidelines are crucial because they influence how we interpret neurological deficits and plan our rehabilitation strategies. Recognizing which side is dominant helps us understand the potential impact of the paralysis and tailor our approach accordingly. When coding for pain using the ICD-10-CM, it's important to remember to use the G89 codes, which are designated for pain that is not classified elsewhere. These codes should be applied when the patient is experiencing pain that is acute, chronic, post-thoracotomy, post-procedural, related to a neoplasm, or associated with a pain syndrome. Essentially, if the encounter is specifically for pain management, G89 codes are the appropriate choice. However, if the underlying condition that's causing the pain is the main reason for the visit, then you should prioritize coding that condition instead. In other words, don't just code the pain. Focus on the root cause when it's the primary reason for the encounter. This approach helps ensure that the coding accurately reflects the patient's clinical situation and the purpose of the visit. Remember, these guidelines help us provide clear, precise documentation that supports proper coding and billing, ultimately fitting into the bigger picture of delivering quality patient care. When it comes to coding pain using G89, it's important to remember that we only assign this code when the pain is specifically described as acute, chronic, or related to specific procedures or conditions. If the documentation doesn't clearly specify these categories, like post-thoracotomy, post-procedural, neoplasm-related, or a pain syndrome, you should not assign a G89 code. Now, if the encounter is primarily for pain management, such as inserting a neurostimulator, the correct approach is to assign the G89 code first. Then, you add the codes for the underlying condition causing the pain, if that information is available, along with the site of the pain. Connecting this to our overall theme, the key is ensuring accurate and specific coding by paying close attention to how the pain is described and documented. Proper coding not only reflects the true clinical picture, but also supports appropriate reimbursement and data collection. Let's go over some important guidelines for coding pain using G89. When both a G89 code and a site-specific pain code are appropriate, and the visit is focused on pain management, it's key to remember to sequence the G89 code first. This helps ensure accurate reporting of the pain condition overall. Now, if the pain is related to a neoplasm, you should use the G89-3 code, which specifically indicates neoplasm-related pain. And don't forget, the neoplasm itself should also be reported as an additional diagnosis to give a complete picture. For chronic pain syndrome, if the physician documents chronic pain syndrome, use the G89-4 code. Similarly, if the physician specifically mentions central pain syndrome, then you should use G89-0. The main takeaway here is to carefully match the documentation with the correct G89 code, especially considering the specific type of pain, and to sequence the codes properly to reflect the primary reason for the encounter. These guidelines help us capture the complexity of pain conditions accurately in our coding.